So, hi guys, welcome to Strolling Wise Minds. This is Kanish, your host, and today I probably have someone from across the borders, just from the same planet of curiosity. Uh, I just would like to welcome Mr. Ron Voller. He is currently has 20 plus years of experience in the entertainment and media industry, and I'll not say entertainment, I'll say informative. And the reason of replacing this word particularly goes around the common thing we have and our listeners have with Mr. Ron Waller is that branch of curiosity which I just mentioned. He's the writer of the book Hubble Humason and the Big Bang. He works with a production house called the Wiggle Productions, and today is the first part of, or maybe I'll consider it the first part of, because nothing in the cosmos ends infinitely. So the first part of our conversation with him about the book and the writing process he adapted, about how to go on about writing a book, and could help a lot of science fiction writers and maybe writers of multiple kinds. So we'll get straight into the conversation. Hello, Mr. Anvola, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me, Kanish.
Yeah. So thank you for being in the podcast. So I just figured out. I just found your book on Amazon, and I was really intrigued by the idea of going about some idea, picking a problem statement, writing something about it. So I would just like you to shed some light upon this particular process you have of picking up a problem statement, going on writing to it, and preparing a proof of concept, and finally making it a production or maybe a book. So yeah, could you shed some light upon that?
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. I think curiosity is the key to it. I believe that the common idea is that people should write what they know. That to an extent I agree with that, but I think the bigger key is curiosity. You should write what you're curious about. Whether it's fiction, nonfiction, science fiction, whatever genre you decide to get into, what you're curious about is going to get you the most involved, and you need to be super involved in whatever content it is you're producing, for whatever medium you're producing it for. So I start with that, and my background is in music and literature. But as a kid growing up, I was heavily steeped in the sciences, including architecture and astronomy, etc. And so they've always kind of been spinning around. And so I think what happened is when you're curious about a given subject, subjects or themes become apparent to you. You just start seeing them. And as you look around at the world. And that's what happened to me with Humason. Milton Humason was the subject of my first book. And, from there, I learned this over time. So there was what I'm saying now, I developed as a process over many years. And I think different writers may have slightly different processes. But basically, once I knew something, I knew that I wanted to write about Milton Humason. The first thing I did was start searching around. What do other people know about this guy? Where is what information is out there in the world? And of course, these days, even more than when I started 20 years ago, nearly 20 years ago, that is a very easy thing to start doing. There's a lot of information out there for people these days. From there, I started reaching out to various individuals that I thought would be connected to the subject, getting feedback about, trying to get feedback, seeing if where could I do more research on the subject. I started to gain knowledge about where he worked, where he was from, and so I just started to kind of build kind of a general outline of, okay, what's the time frame we're talking about? Where are we talking about? Who are the people that were associated with him most closely that will help me get, maybe a little bit more detail on his life. And from there, I built a timeline. And then I had to start into my research. And that's when, you know, in the terms of a research project, that's when the devil is in the details. You need to, you know, reach out to facilities and get get authorization to research there. In my case, most of the work I did in research was at the Huntington Library in Pasadena, California, nearby where Humason lived and worked for his entire career as an astronomer. So, and indeed, Edwin Hubble as well. He went to college in Wisconsin at the University of Chicago, but most of his work as a professional astronomer was done at Mount Wilson and Mount Palomar. So yeah, that was kind of the idea. And you build a timeline, you build momentum, you work for a while, and I'll bring this back to fiction here in a minute, but you work at getting the details down so that you know the subject as well as anybody can know it. And then you start, only then do you start really putting pen to paper, in my case anyway, and start to build the story. And the same, you know, if I were building, and I write fiction, screenplay, etc. So it's the same process, maybe a little bit slightly different in the world of fiction. In the world of fiction, I might build a timeline for a thing, but it could be a futuristic timeline. Or, you know, if it's a period piece, I build that timeline, but then I'm building the world myself if I'm building a fictional world. But I spend time doing that so that I know that environment before I start writing. I don't just let the words carry me. To some extent you do, but because you do learn through the process of developing your characters and putting them in the storyline. And that kind of works in nonfiction as well. But it's kind of the same idea. But the way I approach it is kind of the same idea. I like to have an outline. I like to know who it is I'm writing about and the world that they are possessing, and then write from there. And I usually write three versions of the same story before I kind of have it where I want it.
So, whenever anyone reads something related to astronomy, astrophysics, something beyond the stars, basically. So the first thing you expect under the writer's name is a doctor, like somebody who would be astronomer, PhD, astrophysicist. That will be penning down the entire thing. But in the book you wrote, you approach things in a political context as well, in different contexts as well. So I would like to know what is the process of articulating it all together, like what kind of technical inclination and technical aptitude is required for somebody to articulate something that is not so fictional, that based like rigorously based upon facts and numbers and figures. So how is the process different? If it is it even different? And yeah, basically you understand my question.
Yeah, I do understand. It's a good question. So the way I would relate myself is a writer of science history. So in my case, in the case of somebody like Neil deGrasse Tyson, or Carl Sagan, or Brian Greene, or Michio Kaku, any of those people writing a book of science, they're writing from a very well-informed angle.
Quantitative standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, it's much more, and they, to one degree or another, if they're eloquent enough as a writer, proficient enough as a writer, that they can make their story entertaining and readable. And those four individuals I named are very good at it, very good at writing, so that you're captivated by what they're writing. In my case, I'm accessing people with their knowledge, but I'm really writing stories about people. If you read Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson, which is a lovely little book, you'll get a really good idea of how the world of cosmology, the field of cosmology, has come to the point it is now, and all of the questions that are out there in Tyson's mind and other minds. So but you don't get a great deal of the people that developed that history. Whereas if you read Simon Singh, for instance, his book Big Bang was a big influence on me. It's all about people in the history, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's where I'm coming from as a writer. I want to know who the people were who came to the conclusions that they came to, what things were motivating them, what the world was that from which they came, and the world they entered into. So how did they shape the future? How what impact did they have, and what impact did the world have on them? That's kind of my game.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Please go on.
Yeah. Oh no, I would just say that's I would wrap up there. I just as an historian and as a person very involved and very curious about the human animal, philosophically and psychologically, that's the thing I'm most curious about. The science, the astronomy part of it, the fact that we have this idea of a Big Bang is really fascinating to me, but it's as much about the ability for people standing on this tiny pebble in the middle of nowhere to come up with these ideas that really fascinates me.
Sure. Like you said, all this, like we're starting in the middle of nowhere. It's a kind of, it can be considered as a very romanticizing thought. Okay, what this particular thought of this paradigm of thoughts would not appear to someone who is a scientist, like who has had I'll say a quantitative insight in all those concepts, who talks about billion light years or something like that. So he considers and sees everything. He'll see the exact distance between the sun and the moon. In a I'll again say that quantitatively seems to be the word of the day, but in a very quantitative standpoint. So yeah, but as you being a writer on the other hand, would take it as something which can be considered very far. You'll be using I'll say words from Milton to describe distance. You'll be describing distance from a romantic point of view. So do you consider having a mix of these things make you a better consumer of literature, or maybe someone who can adapt literature in a better from a better standpoint again?
A better standpoint? I don't know if it's better. I think that we're probably coming to the same place, and I don't think that human culture would have advanced to the degree we have with all of the problems still out there, et cetera. Without the science, without the work of Pythagoras, speaking of angles, without understanding, building those theories and then building theories upon those theories, or the Socratic school, looking at those theories, but also saying, no, wait a minute, we need this school of thought around the human condition. And we need to also be focused on that. Those things correlate with one another, and increasingly so as time has gone on. It took a very, very long time from the days of Pythagoras and Socrates, et cetera, to get to the point where philosophy and science really started to integrate with one another. More than 1,000 years for that to start happening. And we needed to come together as a global community too. I mean, we always talk in the West about, I know you're not in the West, apologies. But here in the West, we talk about, the Greek philosophers, et cetera, et cetera. I know you understand, I know you get that there too, but we don't hear anything about Chinese astronomy. We don't hear anything about Islamic astronomy, which was happening at the same time.
Sure.
So we're all grappling with this, and it's only been in the last, many hundred years that the world has really started to come together, and thankfully so, because now we can start to realize, oh wow, they were thinking about this stuff. Shinzu was thinking about this stuff at the same time that Aristarchus was, and really starting to formulate the idea that we're in this together. So I think the two are linked to, very, very strongly linked.
Sure. like I'll agree to this particular POV of yours because as much as we discuss about Socrates or maybe Greek philosophers and astronomers, there's a very famous name in India. If you have heard of it, it's called Aryabhatta. He was the creator of zero as a number, and he was a very famous Indian astronomer. So we don't particularly he's not being talked about a lot in the West because somewhat I consider is that the Western astronomers have been so profoundly influential on all the world that it somehow got hold of key. They don't are not very accepting in nature. Again, that's what I've considered from the discussion I've been doing from a lot of years. So I'll put that aside. We'll put that aside, and I would like to think.
But you're very right, though, about that, if I may. I mean, Mario Livio, I think, writes about it in his book Zero, about the history of the number zero. And I think it's very important. Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about Satyendra Nath Bose, who is the name behind the boson, which is such a crucial part of quantum mechanics and a crucial part of what we know about the universe, the subatomic universe, that is as influential as general relativity on the world that we know today. So yeah, they have started, I think, Chinese astronomy to a lesser extent, but definitely Indian culture has influenced the West quite a lot. And that, I wonder if that is geographical. You know, if you consider the extent to which the Silk Road was kind of India was kind of the center point between Europe and China. You know, I mean, I think it was Lokaksema in the Buddhist
one of the most prominent English colonies India has been.
Yeah, I think that, so I think that that integration may have started through that process. So yeah, very important point. They are linked. They are linked. I think that's what I was saying before about that, as populations grew and grew more and more together and integrated more with one another, we've started to get more and more of a sense of that. And certainly in the 21st century, I don't think most cosmologists really understand that correlation. It's not out there in the general public. I don't think the general public even considers the number zero on very much at all, but it's there, and it has a purpose in understanding the development of science and history, like anything else.
I sort of agree to that because when Oppenheimer came up with in this presentation ceremony of the atom bomb, so he quoted the Bhagavad Gita. It's a very famous Indian scripture. I hold death, and this it's like yeah. So it's like moving aside to me discussing about this particular context was you have been a student of music and literature. You've been writing something which is very closely linked to physics and mathematics and all. So and you've been giving it a political angle as well. So do you think a writer should be someone who's not coming from more say like a literature background? He can come from like me being an engineer. This particular podcast I have all the podcasts I've made are pretty much technical. I've been software engineers, I've been product managers on my podcast. The main reason of me making this podcast is that people from my university and my locality and everyone who's watching my podcast could gain something from that. They could plan their careers and life ahead using these conversations. So you being a writer, could you like help people in their sophomores, in their pre-final years, in their final years, which is planning about starting out their careers? What should they do and what kind of mindset should they inculcate so that writing and a creative paradigm basically remains a very plausible option for them?
Do you mean in whatever career they get into, writing about their field? I would say there aren't, I don't know what a pure writer looks like. I guess maybe in the fictional world, that's maybe more the case. But I think writers are just people who are, after the same things and living the same kind of life as other people. Mm-hmm. But they're their level of self-expression just happens in the literary world.
Yes, that's the point I wanted to validate from you. Being a writer does not mean you have some sort of educational qualification, or you just need to have a sort of curious and romantic standpoint. Again, standpoint seems to be the word of the day again. That you have a very curious standpoint over things and should look things in a different perspective. You should approach a particular problem statement in a different perspective. So that that aptitude can be inculcated through different means. That does not mean you should be from a certain given discipline of education.
Agree. Yes. So for some people, they learn through a familiar education. So for some people, they will prefer to go to get a writing course, and that's fine if that's how you access information or access a kind of comfort level with a given idea. But you certainly don't need to have a degree in literature to write a book. I would say that Neil deGrasse Tyson probably doesn't. Maybe he does. Maybe he did go back and get that. But he's always been curious, and he's always been a reader. And so he is writing in his field. So it's, I think then you start to access points that you really are comfortable writing in, and you write that. I don't know that Neil deGrasse Tyson will suddenly come out with a children's book series. He may, but I don't expect to see that necessarily. I expect him to be writing in the world that he's writing in. And I would say that's the case for anyone, whether you're in engineering. If you want to write about robots, I think I could read a book about robots if somebody put something out that I thought was of interest. I'm very curious about the world, so I tend to delve into different genres quite a lot. So, but that's not the same for everyone. But yeah, I would say if you're curious about a subject, if you're involved in a subject, and you're involved to the extent that you have questions that you want to resolve and more questions you want to ask, and then write about it. I would say definitely write about it.
And
it's not easy, but you can do it.
You stand on this implication that writing is not a profession; it's a mindset. Basically, so yeah, I mean this is what we have for you for all our views. That generally we can pan out a journey into writing into through using different mindsets and things we're comfortable writing in. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of my particular streak of questions. And yeah, so something you think we missed in this conversation, you would really like the viewers to hear that from your journey of writing the Hubble Humason. The third time pronouncing it, I'm pronouncing it wrong again. The Hubble Humason and the Big Bang.
Here's the book.
Yeah, please go read it. Order it from Amazon. It's available in Amazon India as well. So yeah, please go read it and give it a big thumbs up, and you'll definitely like it. So yeah, something you found out while researching about this book, and something you found out in your writing journey that you would really like to share.
Wow. So many things you learn about yourself when you get into writing. And I think that's what I would share is writing isn't just a journey to understand a given subject or to write about your expertise about a given subject. What's interesting, Milton Humason actually said this about the stars, but what's interesting about writing, like any world you get into, is the things you learn that you didn't know were coming down the line. That is so interesting, and really, really reflects strongly on curiosity and, like I said, the human animal. Be curious about the world, and don't be afraid to turn over stones to get to some answers that you think you want to get to. And that's really what I learned. One of the big lessons I learned along the way.
Actually, like, you put a lot of thought into a beautiful line. That's a great thought, I'll say. So yeah, that brings me to the end of the podcast, and a big thanks to you for doing this. It's been really long since we've been planning it. The viewers might not know, but yeah, it's like really long we've been planning this. And so how was the experience in the podcast?
I'm sorry it took me so long to get to you, but I'm really glad we did. I had a great time. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for lending your time to us. And so, yeah. I'll just end the recording.